My dad kicked me out at 15 just to please his wife. Before I get to that devastating moment, let me take you back to the beginning. Because what happened when I was 3 years old set everything in motion, and by the time I was sitting on that motorcycle with my dad at 7, feeling the wind in my face and thinking everything was finally going to be okay, I had no idea I was heading straight into 12 years of hell. But 5 years before that devastating betrayal, there was this one moment when I actually believed my dad loved me. I was sitting with my grandmother in our tiny village house, the same house where I'd been living since I was 3 years old. I was one of millions of kids living below the poverty line, but I didn't understand what that meant yet. All I knew was that some days we ate roasted crab because there was nothing else. Some days we ate nothing at all. My grandmother would tell me stories about my dad, how he was working hard in the city, how he would come back for me someday. I held on to those words like they were promises written in stone. Every night I'd fall asleep imagining what it would be like when he finally came to get me. Then one morning, when I was 7, I heard the sound of a motorcycle outside. My grandmother's face lit up in a way I'd never seen before. She grabbed my hand and we rushed to the window. There he was, my dad, sitting on his bike with a long piece of bread in his hand, the kind I'd only seen in the stores in town but never tasted. "Pack your things," my grandmother whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Your papa is here." I remember that motorcycle ride like it was burned into my memory. The wind whipping through my hair, the smell of my dad's cologne mixing with the exhaust fumes, his strong back in front of me, solid and real. I wrapped my arms around his waist and squeezed as tight as I could, thinking this must be what safety feels like. This must be what having a father feels like. We rode for what felt like hours, leaving the village behind. I watched the landscape change from dirt roads to paved streets, from tiny houses to bigger ones with actual yards. My dad even stopped at a store and bought me that long bread. I tore into it like I hadn't eaten in days, which honestly, I probably hadn't. "You're going to love your new home," he said, ruffling my hair. Those were the first words he'd spoken directly to me in 4 years. But when we pulled up to the house, something felt wrong immediately. It was bigger than anything I'd ever lived in, sure. But it felt cold, empty. Like nobody actually lived there. They just existed there. My dad parked the bike and we walked up to the front door. He didn't knock. He just opened it like he belonged there. And that's when I saw her for the first time. This woman I'd never met before, standing in the kitchen wearing an apron like she owned the place. "This is your new mom," my dad said, his voice suddenly different, careful, like he was walking on glass. She looked at me the way you'd look at a stray dog someone just dragged into your clean house. Her eyes moved from my dirty village clothes to my bare feet to my unwashed hair. I saw her nose wrinkle slightly like I smelled bad, which I probably did. "Hi," I whispered, suddenly feeling ashamed of everything about myself. She didn't say hi back. She just nodded once and turned back to whatever she was cooking. The silence stretched on forever until my dad cleared his throat. "Why don't you go wash up for dinner?" he said to me. But his eyes were on her, watching her reaction to everything. That night, I lay in a real bed for the first time in years. Clean sheets, a pillow that wasn't flat as cardboard. I should have felt grateful. I should have felt lucky. Instead, I stared at the ceiling and listened to voices coming from the next room. My dad's voice and hers, talking in low tones about something I couldn't quite make out. Then I heard footsteps in the hallway. I closed my eyes and pretended to sleep as my dad cracked open the door to check on me. But after he left, I heard different footsteps, slower ones, deliberate ones. I opened my eyes just a crack and saw her silhouette in my doorway. She stood there for what felt like forever, just watching me, not like a mother checking on her child, like a predator studying its prey. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of my dad getting ready for work. I rushed to the kitchen, hoping to catch him before he left. Maybe we could have breakfast together. Maybe he'd ruffle my hair again like he did yesterday. But when I got to the kitchen, she was already there, sitting at the table with a cup of coffee, still in that same apron. My dad was grabbing his keys, rushing toward the door. "Dad, wait!" I started. He turned around, and for just a second his face softened, like he remembered who I was, like he remembered that motorcycle ride and that moment when everything felt possible. But then she cleared her throat, one small sound, and I watched my dad's expression change completely. The softness disappeared. The distance came back. "Be good," he said to me, but his eyes were on her again, always on her. After the door closed behind him, I stood there in that kitchen feeling smaller than I'd ever felt in my life. She took a slow sip of her coffee and looked at me over the rim of her cup. "So," she said, her voice honey-sweet but with something sharp underneath, "I guess we're going to be spending a lot of time together." That was the moment I realized the motorcycle ride was over. The fantasy was over. I wasn't being rescued. I was being delivered. And something inside me broke that night. Not dramatically, not all at once, but like a crack in glass that you know is going to spread until the whole thing shatters. After hearing about that first night when she stood in my doorway like a predator studying its prey, do you think I should have told my dad what I was feeling? Or was I right to keep quiet at 7 years old? Drop your answer in the comments below, because what happened next would make me question that choice for years to come. But 3 years later, when I turned 10, that crack finally shattered completely. That's when her real personality came out. That's when my life became a living hell. Every single morning, she had the same routine. She would wake up early, make my dad breakfast, kiss him goodbye at the door like the perfect wife. But the moment, and I mean the exact moment, his motorcycle disappeared around the corner, she would turn into a completely different person. I'd be sitting at the kitchen table, still in my pajamas, trying to eat whatever leftover rice or bread she'd left for me, and she would walk back into that kitchen like a predator who'd been waiting all night to pounce. "Your mother was a prostitute," she'd say, her voice calm and matter-of-fact, like she was telling me the weather. "Did you know that? That's why your father left her. That's why she gave you away." The first time she said it, I dropped my spoon. The sound echoed in that silent kitchen like a gunshot. I was 10 years old. I didn't even know what that word meant. But the way she said it, with such disgust, such certainty, I knew it was something terrible. "That's not true," I whispered, my voice barely audible. She laughed. Not a happy laugh. A cold, sharp sound that made my skin crawl. "Oh, it's true, little boy. Your precious mama denied ever having a son. She told your father she never wanted to see you again. Why do you think you lived with your grandmother for so long?" I started crying. I couldn't help it. Every single day, millions of abused children experience this kind of psychological warfare, and the trauma causes them to lose their sense of safety and trust in the world. But I was just a 10-year-old kid who missed his mom and didn't understand why she wasn't there. She would lean against the counter, sipping her coffee, watching me cry like it was entertainment. Then she'd continue. "She's probably with another man right now. Probably has other kids she actually loves. You were just a mistake she wanted to forget." This became our morning routine. Dad leaves. She attacks. I cry. She watches. But the psychological torture was just the beginning. After she finished destroying my sense of self-worth for the day, she'd move on to the practical humiliation. "Go wash your clothes," she'd say, pointing to a pile of my dirty shirts and pants. "By hand, in the backyard." Meanwhile, her own children's clothes would be neatly folded in baskets, fresh from the washing machine. I'd watch through the kitchen window as I scrubbed my shirts against the washboard, my hands red and raw from the cold water and harsh soap, while she loaded her kids' clothes into the dryer. When her children spilled something on themselves, she'd rush to clean them up, cooing and fussing over them like they were made of glass. When I spilled something, which happened more often because I was nervous and shaking most of the time, she'd make me clean it up myself and then re-clean the entire area because you never do anything right. Her kids got fresh meals cooked with love. I got whatever was left over, usually cold, sometimes spoiled. Her kids got help with their homework at the kitchen table. I did mine alone in my room, struggling with concepts no one explained to me. But the worst part wasn't the differential treatment. The worst part was what it did to my mind. I started believing her. After months of hearing the same words every morning, that my mother was a prostitute, that she didn't want me, that I was unwanted and unloved, I began to question everything I thought I knew about myself. Maybe she was telling the truth. Maybe my mom really didn't want me. Maybe that's why I ended up at my grandmother's house. Maybe that's why my dad took so long to come get me. Maybe I really was just a burden everyone was stuck with. Research shows that children who are emotionally abused are more likely to experience long-term depression, anxiety, low self-esteem, and unstable relationships. And that's exactly what was happening to me. I was 10 years old, and I was already convinced I was worthless. The breaking point came on a Tuesday morning in October. I remember because it was my birthday. I had woken up early, hoping maybe this one day would be different. Maybe she'd remember it was my birthday. Maybe she'd be nice to me. I was sitting at that same kitchen table, and she walked in with her coffee cup, ready to start her daily ritual of tearing me down. But this time, I found the courage to speak up. "It's my birthday today," I said quietly, not looking up from my bowl. She stopped walking. For a moment, the kitchen was completely silent. Then I heard her set down her coffee cup. "So?" she said. I looked up at her, confused. "So, I thought maybe we could do something special? Or maybe you could call my dad at work and—" That's when she spit in my face. The saliva hit my cheek and slowly dripped down toward my mouth. I sat there frozen, not understanding what had just happened. No one had ever spit on me before. I didn't even know people did that to other people. "Your birthday?" she said, her voice dripping with contempt. "You think anyone cares about the day a mistake like you was born? Your own mother probably wishes she could forget this day ever happened." I wiped the spit off my face with my sleeve, but I couldn't wipe away the humiliation, the shame, the complete and utter destruction of whatever small hope I'd been carrying around that maybe, someday, someone in this house would love me. That night, when my dad came home, I almost told him. I was sitting on my bed, rehearsing the words in my head. "Dad, she spits on me. Dad, she tells me Mom was a prostitute. Dad, she makes me wash my clothes by hand while her kids get everything." But then I heard them talking in their bedroom. Their voices were muffled, but I could make out enough to understand that she was telling him about her day, about how well-behaved her children were, about how grateful he should be to have such a wonderful wife taking care of his difficult son. And I heard him agree with her. "You're so patient with him," he said. "I know he's not easy. Thank you for everything you do." That's when I realized the truth. This wasn't a secret she was keeping from my dad. This was a performance they were both part of. He knew exactly who she was, and he had chosen her anyway. He had chosen her over me. From that night forward, I stopped hoping for rescue. I stopped believing things would get better. I became extremely loyal to them both because of the fear of being punished if I ever reported what was happening and because I started to believe this was just a normal way of life. I was 10 years old, and I had learned the most devastating lesson of my childhood. The people who were supposed to protect me were the ones hurting me. And there was nowhere to run, nowhere to hide, and no one coming to save me. The pattern was set. Every morning for the next 5 years, she would wait for him to leave, and then she would systematically destroy whatever small piece of self-worth I had managed to rebuild overnight. And every evening he would come home to his perfect family, never asking why his son looked so broken, never wondering why I flinched every time she walked into a room. By the time I turned 15, I wasn't even the same person who had ridden on that motorcycle with hope in his heart. I was a shell of a kid who had learned to expect nothing but cruelty from the people who claimed to love him. And that's exactly the state of mind I was in when she finally convinced my dad to get rid of me for good. Subscribe for episode 2. You need to see how this ends.